Hi everyone, it's Miss Mason again, reading Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan. Today we're going to be reading chapters 11 through 13. Chapter 11. Mai watched as Willow got out of the back seat and headed up the driveway, pulling her wheeled luggage behind her. Kwang Ha mumbled, "Someone should tell her to get a backpack." Mai shot him a hard look, which she knew would keep her brother quiet. She could see that the strange girl's house had been painted the color of the shrimp curry that her mother made. It was a bold yellow that stuck out in the drab neighborhood. But what really interested Mai was behind the house, because it was very green back there. On one side, a stand of timber bamboo jutted up 3 stories high. On the other edge of the property, a tall palm tree and several smaller, bluish-silver eucalyptus trees trembled together in the late afternoon wind. Staring at the house and the properties next door, it looked to Mai like there was a jungle behind where Willow lived. No one else had that. Not in a neighborhood that spent 200 days a year without rain. Maybe, she theorized, the girl's parents owned a plant nursery. Her brother didn't seem interested in Willow, or her house, but Dell stared intently with his nose almost touching the glass as Willow removed a key from a zipped pocket in her carry-on luggage. Any regular little kid would have then turned and waved back, or done something to acknowledge the people in the waiting car. But Willow simply unlocked the door and slid inside, disappearing into the shadows of the curry-colored house as if she were suddenly invisible. It was intriguing. Once Willow was gone, Mai watched as Del Duke jerked his car out of park, hitting the gas pedal so quickly that the Ford lurched forward like a broken carnival ride. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. So he was that eager to get rid of them? Interesting. She hadn't had a very good opinion of the counselor, but in the last hour she had been feeling bad about his lost cat. Now she was quickly returning to her original position. Del Duke was not a natural at his job. After Del dropped off the troublemaker and his flame-throwing sister, he headed home. The route took him directly by the school district offices, and that was when he saw Cheddar sitting in the still hot sun on the top of a once-green dumpster at the south side of the parking lot. Del didn't even brake to get a better look. There were rats on the property. That was just a fact. As far as Del was concerned, Cheddar could pull his own weight back there, and maybe shed a pound or two in the process. Del had picked up the cat after reading a notice online about a lost pet. It wasn't a shelter, so he didn't have to pay any fees. He just claimed the flea bag and even took the plastic cat carrier that the old lady offered. The woman seemed thrilled to be reuniting the cat with the owner. Del almost felt bad. Still, he was going to dump the lost cat flyers in the trash. He had promised the kids that he'd post them, but that was just to keep them in their shoes. They'd been pretty anxious about losing Cheddar. The flyers were on the passenger side floorboard of the car. Now, as he waited at the traffic light, he had to admit that the drawing, coupled with the imaginative and dedicated coloring that Kwang Ha had done earlier in the afternoon, was disturbing. The kid was a lone wolf. He was coded green. It was just wrong for the delinquent to have any artistic talent. But anyone could see from the picture of Cheddar that the surly kid had some kind of visual sense. Del made a note to change Kwang Ha's category. He was going to be moved to purple, for oddball. Del found himself wondering if all kinds of assumptions were questionable. And that was strange indeed. Once in his possession-choked apartment, Del peeled off his stinky shirt and poured himself a tall glass of red wine. He next shoved a frozen meatloaf, which was supposed to be low in calories, into the microwave. The box claimed it served 3 people. He was trying to diet, but he always found himself eating the whole thing. Del then maneuvered around his heaps of junk and took a seat on his patio furniture, which he used indoors in his living room. He was surprised people didn't realize that a decent chaise lounge was much easier to move, yet still as comfortable as a couch. Most outdoor recliners had wheels for mobility, and you could hose off the cushions if you spilled a bowl of salsa, and who didn't on occasion? Under ordinary circumstances, Del would have turned on the TV to some kind of reality show, and after consuming the meatloaf and enough wine, he would have fallen asleep, usually with his mouth open, which inevitably served as a spout for pink-tinged saliva. The saliva would have stained regular furniture, but it went right through the plastic weave of the lawn chair, which was another plus. Dell would wake up a few hours later, and if he had the energy, make his way through the maze of his possessions to his bedroom, where he would crawl into a sleeping bag. This was another one of his lifestyle choices. Once a year, he dropped the sleeping bag off at the dry cleaners. Forget the sheets and blankets and comforters and duvet covers. Modern life provided enough challenges without throwing in making the bed. But tonight Dell didn't fall asleep in a small puddle of drool. He lay awake in his sleeping bag, which he believed had the smell of a brown bear, a mix of wet fur and dead leaves and empty wine bottles, thinking about the events of his day and the genius kid. Chapter 12. I had a plan. I'd been walking to Mr. Del Duke's office for my appointments, but now that I knew Mai and her brother would be there before me, I wanted to get there early. So I went online the following week and ordered a taxi to pick me up at the curb when school was over. This was a very brave and daring act from me. I waited in front of the sign that said Sequoia Giants, and the taxi arrived right on time. I believed we were off to a good start. I pulled my wheeled luggage to the cab door and leaned in through the open window as I said, "I would like the number of your taxi license and see proof of your compliance with brake and headlight adjustment requirements." The driver's name was Jairo Hernandez, and he had been driving for Mexicana Taxi for 7 years. I was nervous, but he seemed nervous as well. He did not appear, however, to be someone who would kidnap me and cut me into small pieces. After I reviewed his paperwork, which took considerable effort on his part to locate, I got into the back seat. As we pulled away from the curb, he picked up his phone and his radio handset and talked to someone, maybe back in the office. His voice was low. He didn't realize that I am fluent in Spanish, as it was the language I learned after English. This is what he said. "At first, I think I'm picking up some kind of little person going to the airport, because she has luggage. But then I get closer and I see it's just a girl. I'm telling you, man, it's some kind of undercover sting operation. She has to roll my paperwork." I would have stepped on the gas and sped off, but she was leaning in through the window. This is harsh, my friend. If a kid can ambush you outside of middle school, what's next? 2 things. I had never been in a taxi before, and I had never ridden in a car with a complete stranger. I was suddenly an explorer and a risk-taker. I could feel my heart pounding. It felt good. A smile spread across my face. I was on my way to see a new friend. Granted, the person in question was 2 years older than me, and looked to have some anger management issues, as well as a brother who had discipline and authority problems. But no living thing is perfect. All scientists know that. When we arrived at the school district administration parking lot, and I had paid the negotiated fare, with the addition of an 18% tip, I felt very pleased because I'd done this all myself. I looked Jairo Hernandez right in the eye and said, "Never let someone tell you that you can't do it." And then I shut the car door. I was speaking about my own achievement, but from the look on his face, I think he believed I was talking about him. As I came around the corner, I saw Mai sitting on the top stair outside the entrance to Dell's office. Maybe I was imagining this, but I thought the teenage girl looked happy to see me. I quickened my pace while still maintaining control of my red case with the 360-degree spinning wheel option. When I got to the trailer, I was able to say what I had been waiting all week to spring on her. "Chico Klokong?" She said my greeting had perfect inflection. I had learned 85 Vietnamese phrases over the last 7 days, as well as a great deal of verb conjugation. Now I tried some more of them out on her. Mai was incredibly impressed. Not just that I could say these things, but also because she had spent 2 weeks trying to teach a friend's mother 4 words of Vietnamese and had not succeeded. So this effort was worthy. The time flew by. We conversed, at first in English and then in bits of Vietnamese. I usually found so-called small talk boring. I like large talk, which is more about theories and concepts mixed with facts and known quantities. But we didn't have any problem finding things to say to each other, because right away Mai wanted to know about the garden behind my house. All that greenery had intrigued her. I told her about some of my plants and gave a simple explanation of a few of my backyard botanical experiments. And then the next thing I knew, 40 minutes had passed, and the trailer door opened, and Del Duke appeared with Quang Ha at his side. The counselor's eyes widened at the sight of us together. He wanted to know how long I'd been out there and what we'd been talking about. Del Duke was not as friendly as I would have thought, and I got the idea that maybe he wanted to push the Nguyen siblings right down the stairs. His smile was stiff and awkward as he said, "All right then, it's time for Willow's session. Goodbye, kids." I insisted on keeping the door to the trailer open so that I could watch as Mai and Quang Ha receded into the distance. At the last moment, just before the pair turned the corner to head down the block, Mai looked back and waved toward the trailer. The door was angled, so I felt certain that Mai couldn't see me, but she knew I was there. Suddenly I had a strange lump in my throat. I had a new, older friend, a girl from high school. She felt like a protector. It was some kind of magic. I settled into the chair and listened to Del Duke. Today I wasn't going to take tests. Today he said that we were going back to word games. This time he would say an industry, and I would say long-term or short-term projected financial growth. I explained to him before we started that I had very little knowledge of economics. I really considered this a study of social science, not a hard science, and I wasn't interested in the squishy stuff, so I stayed away. But he didn't listen. He was prepared for our session and had a clipboard covered with scrawled notes. I could read upside down pretty easily, and I saw right away that he lacked organization of any kind. His lists had stuff crossed out, and then arrows and all sorts of redirections to bubbles of messy thought. I decided to ignore it. The first thing he said was, "Pharmaceutical companies." Del had instructed me to answer high growth, medium growth, no growth, or eroding market. This was really a crummy game. I thought that pharmaceutical companies were probably always growing because more medications were constantly being developed, and the field of medicine was so rapidly advancing. That was just a fact. So the answer would have to be high growth, especially with an aging population. But I said eroding market because I decided that I wanted to play the opposite game. I just didn't tell him. I was going to see if he was paying attention. But what was sad was that he never caught on and shouted, "You're playing the opposite game." He just kept writing down my junk. On my way home, I evaluated my situation. Being a Sequoia giant had been a colossal disappointment, but going to the new school led to seeing the round-headed counselor, and that enabled me to meet my new friend, Mai. School was better since I figured out that all I had to do was get out of PE, and the violent sport of volleyball was to say that I had migraine headache. I claimed I was going blind from the pain, and then I got sent to lie down in the nurse's office. I knew that the nurse, Miss Judy, liked me because we discussed things like flu outbreaks and the statistics behind spontaneous nosebleeds. So, by the time I walked back up Citrus Court to the front door of our house, I was very happy. Chapter 13. Jairo Hernandez. A pilgrim is a traveler going to a spiritual place. Jairo looked over at the paperwork on the seat next to him, his license, his vehicle inspection information. When he started driving a cab, it was only supposed to be a temporary job, and now years had passed. Jairo picked up his radio and told the office he was going on break. He then drove straight to Bakersfield College, where he picked up a brochure for the Career Pathway Program, which was a continuing education opportunity for people over the age of 30. He was going to investigate the requirements to be a medical technician. The girl he picked up that afternoon had rattled its mobile cage. He realized that she was some sort of shaman when she said, "Never let someone tell you you can't do it." She was a blinking warning light, and Jairo paid attention to signs. For the first time in his career, Del thought about his work when he went home that day. Fate had delivered Alberta Einstein into his life, and he had to figure out a way to take advantage of that. Maybe she could make him smarter. It certainly appeared as if she could improve his financial situation. One thing was for certain. With her in his life, everything was happening so fast.